like to welcome you on the occasion of the 20th anniversary of the Doctor of Management program. And I suspect for many of you who are the early pioneers, time has flown, as with the founders. It's a special privilege for me to introduce the original director of the Doctor of Management program, John Aram. Secondly, one of the champions of the Doctor of Management program at its founding was a legendary dean and later president at the University of Tulane, Scott Cowen. Now, I had the privilege of my first tour of duty at the Weatherhead School of Management. John was my department chairman, and Scott was my dean. So there, you can go home again. I'd like to also highlight this program was not only the first of its kind, but it's the best of its kind. And I don't say that from hubris or without lack of evidence. We just had a review by two leading scholars from Michigan and Carnegie Mellon review this program. Every 5 years, our doctoral programs need to be reviewed. And their conclusion to the Doctor of Management program was that not only is it the first, but it's by a clear margin the best of its kind. Now, I would like to highlight that there have only been 3 directors since inception. The founding director, John, Bo Carlson, the second, and our third and current, Callie Lintonen. And of course, this program is a stellar program recognized by all in it and outside of it. And by contrast, since Scott Cowen left in, I believe it was the end of, or the 97-98 school year, yep, we have had 5 regular deans and 4 interim deans. In fact, I was at the Board of Trustees. I think the average tenure is right around 2.5 years. And at the board, I noted that next month, when I had a board meeting 6 months ago, that I would exceed the 2.5-year mark and become the second longest serving dean since Scott Cowen. And somebody said, congratulations. I said, well, let's not be hasty. What we're going to do is ask both Scott and John to reflect on the founding of this fabulous program. And we have some questions that were provided by students and the planning committee, and so we're going to loosely follow them. And they have been prepped, so I don't think we'll be catching anyone off guard. But the first question is, where did the idea for the program come from?
First of all, I can't tell you how delighted I am to be back at Case Western Reserve University and at the Weatherhead School. Whatever successes I've had in life, I attribute to this school and this university and being in Cleveland. And it's especially wonderful for me to be with John Aram, because John and I were colleagues for many years, a very good friend. We co-authored a monograph together and several articles, and I consider him one of my great mentors. So John, I'm glad just to be here with you. The gestation period for this program was about a decade, if you can believe it. I think the idea, or the kernel of the idea, began to emerge in the mid-1980s. It was about that time that we were beginning to develop a new strategic plan and vision for the Weatherhead School. And what we were trying to do was to find a vision and a plan that really differentiated the Weatherhead School from other business schools. And we knew we had some very distinct strengths, especially at that time in organizational behavior, and that may be the case today, in management and several other fields. So we began to put together some thought pieces about what we might be able to do to both differentiate the school, take advantage of our competitive advantage, and also understand that there would be a time in the future where the MBA market and the EMBA market would begin to decline. Yet, the need and desire for adult education would continue. I think it was the convergence of those three events that got things started about 1985 and 1986. But believe it or not, it did take about 8 or 9 years to get it from where we originally started, which was talking about an executive college, a professional fellows program, to where it really wound up being an EDM and, of course, now doctors of management. And it was a long journey. We can talk more about it, but it all started with what's the vision, what's the plan, how to differentiate ourselves, and understanding the reality that management education was going to change dramatically in the decades ahead, which it has, as you know, Rob, and that we'd be at the forefront of thinking about where to go.
Thank you. John?
Well, first, it's really thrilling for me to be here, to come back, to have so many friends and colleagues, and to reunite and to learn what people are doing in their lives, and particularly the sense of satisfaction that gives me of seeing so many productive, active, high contributors out there in society and to organizations. So for me, that's really, really gratifying. And also to be sitting next to my mentor, Scott, who was really the inspiration for many things in the school, and for me particularly in my career. And I have a huge debt of gratitude to express towards Scott. If things that I might add to what Scott said about the context at that time, there were a number of innovations that came out of this thought process and out of Scott's sense of where things were. For example, we put into the MBA program a competency-based education, where students were to progress through their courses based upon their competency, not necessarily their just information requirements. There were new centers set up around the school, a center for venture development, a center for regional economic issues, innovative things, trying to relate the school to the community and to the society in a bigger way. And also in the MBA program, there was an innovation in the whole area that was important, a predecessor to the EDM program as it started, now the DM program. And that is, in the MBA program, it was possible for students to take what we called perspectives courses. And this was like bringing the liberal arts into management education. So the whole notion of the collective action as an important conceptual framework for management education first started in the MBA program through a perspectives course. Globalization was the same kind of emphasis. Technology and society, technology management, first started in the MBA program in an intention to broaden that out and make the MBA stand for something more than a technical discipline. So the EDM program fits into that context, and it was an attempt. Scott saw that at that time there were 80 to 90,000 people graduating every year with an MBA. The only degree opportunity for them was a PhD. That's all that existed at that time. And they had adult learning education needs. People wanted to continue to develop, to expand their understanding, their capabilities. So this program was really conceived of as something post-MBA and non-PhD, although it would have to be a degree of credibility that was worth investing considerable time and energy. So that was sort of the concept, and then there was a process of the faculty to try and fill in the gaps and say, what would that be? How would it be organized? Who would possibly attend that? How much would it cost? What would the curriculum be? How long would it take to graduate, and so forth?
You know, this was a high-risk venture with a very uncertain, you were pioneers. Why did you both decide to champion the program?
Actually, Rob, I actually didn't think it was high risk at all. I felt it was mandatory. I mean, if you were sitting back in the 1980s and you were thinking forward about what is going to happen to business schools and management education, it was clear. I mean, it was fairly clear what was going to happen to the MBA market. And then you knew that shortly thereafter would be the EMBA market. So my view was we had to do something differently. I didn't quite know what it should be, but one of the things I was blessed with was very talented colleagues, many of whom were in this room, who I knew somehow collectively they possessed the knowledge and understanding of what the possibilities were. So the question is how to motivate them, how to steer them to come up with these ideas. You know, I don't have many great assets, but the one that I have that I've always appreciated is I'm never the smartest guy in the room. And when you're never the smartest guy in the room, that means you have to rely on others, and you have to make sure you have at least an eye for talent. So putting bets on people like John Aram and Richard Boyatzis and Bo Carlson, and I could go on down the list, was a good bet. So the question was to throw out the challenge to them, to think differently. Plus, I was plagued by this notion that we weren't distinctive as a school. You know, I was talking to you about what's the elevator speech. I believe in that. If you can't say it in 5 to 7 minutes, not to be simplistic or trite, it's not clear in your head. So we went on this pathway, and I think through a lot of hard work, and I give John Yeoman's credit and the faculty for it, we ultimately morphed to it. It wasn't clear at the beginning that's where we would end up, but that's where we did end up. So it was easy for me to champion it because it conformed with my view of what the school should be doing and how we should go about trying to differentiate ourselves.
Thank you, Scott. John?
Well, this may come as a shock to people, but I initially opposed the idea. I was pretty strongly against it. I was a department chairman of a recently formed department of management policy, marketing, and human resources, labor relationships. We had hired a number of very talented and strong scholars like Rob Whiting to join our faculty. We had a PhD program, and it was a very weak program. And I was sitting there as a department chairman, and I was viewing the needs of our young faculty members to have PhD students to work with. That's the tradition that they came out of, and that's what they wanted in our school. So at the first idea, the program, the EDM program, seemed to me that it was going to diffuse our resources. It was going to cause us to lose our focus. And so Scott asked me to be in charge of the committee to plan it. So I don't know if you remember that.
Oh, I do remember very well. And Doris Kearns hadn't even written her book about Abraham Lincoln. But somehow I caught on the idea, John doesn't like it. Boy, if John will head it up, two things will happen. One, it will be incredibly high standards, which I knew you always represented, having worked with you. And in the end, if you endorsed it, then it would be worthy of the school. So that was a very conscious effort to ask you to do it. And all I didn't know is along that journey, whether you would finally come to a concrete decision it wasn't worth it, or whether it was worth it. And obviously, you came to that latter conclusion. So that's why I love you.
So the program did appeal to me in several senses. I'd been teaching these perspectives courses, and it looked to me like an opportunity to really try and bring those ideas and that perspective, that whole notion of the liberal arts, interdisciplinary basis of management education, into a program to try and make that real as opposed to a couple of courses in an MBA program. And it was something new. It was something different. And I was probably at a stage in my career where that made sense to me also to try and start something new or to go off in a different path.
Scott, I think you've partially answered this, but what were the biggest challenges that you faced in going from concept to reality?
Yeah. Well, first of all, change is always difficult, and the more transformative the change, the more difficult it is. So I think there were 3 or 4 things that I found particularly daunting. One was just getting the faculty focused on this commitment to come up with something new and different. But once again, fortunately, we had a core faculty, which was relatively small in the beginning, 8 or 9 who believed the same way, and they became, if you will, the point of the arrow to move this along. So that was one. The second one was moving along. I wasn't kidding when I said it took 8 or 9 years to get it from point. And I'm somewhat impatient. So there'll be times in this I say, what are they doing? I mean, this is not rocket science, for God's sake. So there are times where I would step in fairly heavily and then run away after I did it, just to keep it moving. So it was just the process, if you will, from beginning to end. Having said that, though, once again, I always had confidence in John, Boyatzis, Kolb, I could name all of them, that they would get to the right solution. The second one was then convincing the university. So you may not recall, the university did not warm to this idea at all. So I spent many an hour in Agpitta's office with the faculty senate, arguing why we should make this particular change. And after, once again, probably a year or 2 years of just constantly badgering them, the faculty senate did approve it. And then the third thing was the state had to authorize it. The board and the state had to authorize it. The board was very willing to sign off once I think the president signed off on it. But the regents also didn't warm, or whoever they are at that time, didn't warm to the idea. And I remember, John, you actually went and met with the regents, you and a couple of other faculty members, because I figured I'd stay away and let the shells hit you, and then I'd come in later on if I had to. And you came out undaunted from it. But that was sort of the third thing. But this notion about transformative leadership, boy, it's a great, great idea. We love it until you actually have to do it. And then it becomes hard, and I'll talk about that later this afternoon in the symposium, because it's hard work. And my colleagues here, and they know who they are, they did that hard work, and they came up with a brilliant idea, and I can't tell you how proud I am of them, all the current faculty, and all of you, to come back 20 years later and still say, this is an unbelievably distinctive program in business schools in America. It really, really is. But listen, every great change, you have scars on your back to prove it was a great change, but we overcame all the obstacles, in my view.
Thank you, Scott. John, as first director, what were your greatest challenges?
Well, let me first just add one thing to what Scott said. Paul Salapante and I were both on this faculty committee that was doing the planning, and we went to the executive committee of the Board of Trustees together to make these presentations, and we had to go back several times. And we really took a lot of flack. I came back saying, this is not going to fly. And we asked them at least to put it up to the faculty senate and have a discussion of it, which they agreed to do. We brought in the heavy artillery for that meeting. Scott came in, and he had so much prestige and so much influence in the university. The faculty of Senate approved the program right there. It was just unbelievable. A remarkable demonstration of leadership. In terms of the challenges that I faced, there were 3. Students, faculty, and administration.
That's all.
The question to students was, will they come? We've built it. Will they come? And we had done the market research nationally, stratified sample. Jagdeep ran this market study, so you know it was done very well. And there were, in this study, 13% of the total national population that we sampled that said, yes, I would like this type of a program, global in focus, interdisciplinary, integrating practice and theory, and so on and so forth. So we had some confidence that there was a market out there, but we didn't know if people would actually sign up. And I think we started that first class with 13 individuals. I think a number of them are here tonight. They are the pioneers. They are the risk takers. They took into the unknown. Would you stand up? Would those class of 98 stand up?
Come on, go.
And then we had the faculty, and teaching in this program requires a very special orientation and set of skills. an attitude towards teaching and toward learning. And I'd like any of the faculty that were here in those early years to please stand up, because they really made it happen. And the administration, I realized that the program was going to have to operate seamlessly, that individuals could not be sitting out in California or Michigan or in Europe somewhere, sitting down to do their work. They had a limited amount of time, and the materials had to be there, the assignments had to be clear, the expectations for the faculty, everything had to work in order for the program to function effectively. And if that didn't work, it was going to fall down because other people wouldn't come. So those were the three major challenges that I felt early on.
To both of you, what might you have done differently in hindsight? And secondly, what would you suggest to us for the future?
I think, from my standpoint, we had a couple of very important philosophical issues to resolve around the program. One was, how do we really integrate theory and practice? What does that mean? It's a great ideal. We have to really figure out what it is. And the second piece of it was, I always envisioned the program as really at the interface of an organization and the wider society, and thought that people's research could focus somehow on that interface, that both things are important, they both influence each other, and what contributions can we make to that area? So in terms of things that I would have done differently, I think, I don't know if it would have been possible, but to push harder on those, work more strongly in a focused way with the faculty on those particular issues throughout the early years of the program.
Yeah, I think there's two from my point of view. I would have made sure it didn't happen in 8 years, it happened in 2 years. I thought that the time period was extraordinarily long. I got a little frustrated near the end, constantly having to come back and work it. Having said that, I think it's obviously a great product and probably it needed that time. But the reason I mention that is that one of the things I worry about universities in general is the amount of time it takes to affect change. And this is becoming even more of an issue today than it was 30 years ago when we were debating this particular topic. But you could even sense 30 years ago that somehow the way we did our shared governance wasn't the most effective and efficient model, yet it had to be honored and should be honored, but there could be better ways to do it. And I wish I had thought through that more deeply, back then than I have in recent years since being a university president. I think the other thing is, and I forgot to tell you the other challenge, it probably was Freudian to do that, was about the name doctorate.
Oh, yeah.
That was, both of us probably forgot that. That was, in the end, almost the most controversial issue. We had the program and what to call it. Once again, John, you may have a little different recollection. I think that was probably the one time I did step in and push extraordinarily hard, almost to the point to say, I won't advance it any further unless it's called, a doctorate. I am glad that what's happened over the last 20 years, it's gone from an EDM to a DM, because I do think that is the better name for it. So back then we fought that battle. I think the EDM turned out to be the title we could get, but I'm glad over time it's evolved. Would have been nice to get that right at the very, very beginning.
John?
Just add one little thing to that. When this was kind of at the crux decision point for the school, I took a leave of absence. I got a teaching fellowship in Spain, and I went over there, and so Scott really fought this battle on his own, worked this EDM option through the faculty. When I came back, then that was in place. I didn't have to worry about that. But another interesting feature is when I came back, it was a 36-hour program. I encouraged the faculties to go to a 42-hour program. Going through the faculty executive committee of the Senate, it became a 46-hour program. And going through the Board of Regents of the state of Ohio, it became a 54-hour program. So that's why you have a 54-hour program, if you've ever wondered.
Well, let's show our gratitude to John and Scott in terms of the founding fathers for this program.